Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to the 149th Annual General Meeting of the Wine Society. It's wonderful to see so many people in the room, and I apologize for the slight delay, but registration was a little slower. Now we've got the devices, which I'll talk about a little later. I hope that most of you will know the four of us up here, but just in case, I am Alan Black, the chair of the Society. And next to me is Steve Finlan, our Chief Executive, Emily Roskilly, our Chief Financial Officer, and Pierre Mansour, our Director of Wine. As last year, rather than having the rest of the committee sitting up here doing nothing, we thought it made more sense to have them sitting in the hall with you, hopefully engaging with those around them, so that you know who to talk to and ask questions of later. And during the tasting afterwards, there will be a committee member by each of the tables. So I'm going to ask the committee to stand up now so that you can see where they are. And for the benefit of members online, their photographs are appearing on screen. Thank you. Following last year's changes to the rules, this is the first time we are conducting a hybrid meeting in which members online can fully participate and vote, and ask questions not only by email, but also, if they wish, directly to the meeting. And it will also be the first time that those in the hall will vote using the devices you received when registering. The devices are required to ensure we can quickly and accurately tally the votes of those in the room and those online. I'll explain exactly how the voting will work and how to use the devices when we get to the formal resolutions. Let's hope the technology works and all goes without a hitch. I was going to tell you how many members were in the room by technology, and that says 304 with 160 members online, but there are clearly, I think, many more than 304, so hopefully it will catch up later.
Mine says 421.
So apparently, on the other screen, that says 421 members in the room and 211 members online. I'm going to begin by saying a few words about the Society, and then move to questions, and then to the formal resolutions. And following that and before the tasting, Pierre will say a few words about the wines we're going to enjoy later on. I said at last year's AGM that after a record 2021, with COVID meaning people were staying at home and our sales benefiting accordingly, we were far from complacent about 2022. Which we thought would be a challenging year with significant increases in costs, both for ourselves and our growers, inflation hitting members' pockets directly, and of course our significant spending commitments on Warehouse 5 and the necessary upgrading of our IT infrastructure. And all of that proved correct. Our cost pressures were extreme. But we decided that the proper Society approach to this would be to assist members by maintaining prices as much as we could. And I'm delighted to say that, notwithstanding the pressures on their own wallets, members continued to support us incredibly well, and December set a new record. It was, therefore, especially in the circumstances, a good year for the Society. Key headline numbers for the last financial year. Revenues and sales were down, of course, on the record 2021 figures, but we nevertheless ended the year with gross revenues of almost £148 million. Sales of regular wine were down almost 12% to 122.3 million, but en primeur sales accounted for were up some 20% at 19.4 million. The number of members buying from the Society reduced by just over 3%, and cases per member were down 12%. But each of those was mitigated by an increase in the average case spend of some 1.3%. Our capital expenditure was 14.2 million, including completing Warehouse 5 and the first stage of the IT infrastructure upgrade. And we ended the year with a cash balance of 11.6 million and overall a net surplus of 1.6 million. Our balance sheet remains strong and our cash position healthy. The economic challenges are, of course, continuing this year, and I will talk a little about that later on. I called the annual review the value of our difference, and value is something we care extremely deeply about, And we strive every day to make sure you are getting the best possible value from your membership. We are a mutual, built and run by members for members. We have no third-party owners or shareholders. We are all co-owners, partners in the business, but partners who are not in it to make a financial return, but rather to enjoy the benefits of the society. We need to manage the business professionally and efficiently and make a surplus to ensure we can maintain and improve the business for the future. But we do not seek profit for itself. Everything we make goes back into the business. And we can therefore be focused solely on quality, value, service, and member experience. We don't try to maximize profit. We try to maximize member satisfaction. And all of that makes us a very different organization from a normal wine retailer and enables us to do things that others can't. We believe that this difference provides members with real and practical value, the value of our difference. I want to spend a little time talking about this value and how it lies at the heart of everything we do and what it means for members. First, low prices. Not maximizing profit means we are able to keep prices low. We maintain a running comparison of a basket of equivalent wines from key competitors. And during last year, as it invariably is, our basket was significantly cheaper, notwithstanding some of our competitors' heavy discounting. However, we know that not all members realize this. At the risk of over-laboring the point, therefore, the gap between our prices and the prices of the two competitors most used by our members is wide, and that is before taking into account free delivery and no need to buy a particular volume, 6 for 5, etc. Being offered a discount is very tempting, but it may come off a high normal or single bottle price. Our everyday low prices are astonishingly difficult to beat and rarely are. There was a recent conversation on the Society's community, which, for those who've not yet visited, is on the website, and some suggested that we may not always be the best price. A member who knows how to do these things scraped the data on our site and those of our competitors and showed that we were cheaper even before free delivery. We're also able to absorb costs in partnership with members. Last year, because our members would be suffering their own cost of living challenges, we managed to absorb some £4 million of increased costs so that we could hold prices as much as possible. 2023 has, of course, brought its own pricing difficulties, exacerbated by the impact of the new UK duty scheme to come into in August, which will increase duty on the majority of our wines. The natural consequence for most businesses would be to raise prices. However, as members will know, we made the decision to try to hold the majority of prices and possibly even make reductions if we can. We believe this is the right thing to do for members. However, it obviously reduces our margin, and without more, and if continued for any length of time, would place serious strains on the business and our ability to maintain these low prices. But we can continue to support members in this way if members support us by increasing the share of your wine wallet that you buy from the Society. We each then benefit from the partnership that exists between the Society and our members. The more you buy from us, the more we can hold and even reduce prices. I should say that it appears that this message does resonate with members, and we've had a really positive response to it. Our difference also means we can invest in wines for the future, buying wines to keep in our cellars in optimum conditions so that they can be offered to members, our museum releases, when they are mature and ready to drink, without members having to invest in the wine initially. And it also enables us to have a wide range of wines. Our members don't all want the same wines. It's right and fair, therefore, to offer as wide a range of wines as possible so that each member can enjoy what they want. During last year, we offered more than 6,000 wines from 26 countries, made 29 en primeur offers from 17 regions, released 75 museum release wines, and launched in November our first release offers, a new way of offering in bond wines, and in January, our low and no alcohol range, both of which have been really well received by members. The quality of our wine is, of course, always at the heart of everything we do. We give our buyers a remarkable degree of freedom to buy wines they think our members will enjoy. Again, our difference means they are not constrained by the need for margin, nor by the need for any particular quantity, just quality. It was no surprise, but I'm absolutely delighted that last year the team won the inaugural International Wine Challenge Buying Team of the Year award. Also, as usual, backing up our claims as to the quality of our wines, we won a number of awards from the Decanter Retailer Awards and the International Wine Challenge Awards, and were voted by the public Online Retailer of the Year in the annual People's Choice Awards. And we have only last week won the International Wine Challenge Online Retailer of the Year for this year. And our difference enables us to provide an exceptional service and member experience. Tastings and events. Last year we held 173 events, one every 2 days, 98 in person and 75 online, and demand was of course high. Members were joined by winemakers from 22 wineries from 18 winemaking regions and countries. Delivery. We believe we offer the best delivery service of any wine retailer. Free delivery on all orders, whatever the size, with next day, name the day, and Saturday options. Our fleet of own vans remains highly valued by members. We cannot, however, use our own vans everywhere. And we've developed an excellent relationship with DHL, whose delivery record is comparable with our own vans. And between our own vans and DHL, during last year, we delivered some 950,000 orders, comprising some 1.36 million cases. Reserves. Members don't have to withdraw whole cases from their reserves. That ability to withdraw small amounts, together with next day delivery, provides real flexibility to members. It remains our aim to be regarded as a member's virtual wine cellar. Order a bottle of wine today, and it can be with you for dinner tomorrow. Human contact. Unlike many other businesses, human contact remains vitally important to us. Of course, it's a cost, but it's something we believe is the heart of what we are. We will continue to ensure that you are able to deal with a real person in Stevenage if you want to order by phone or raise any other issues. And behind the scenes, enabling and supporting what we do, we were delighted that Warehouse 5, with its capacity of up to 5 million bottles, was completed within budget. It's already clear just how much of an improvement in our operations this is going to be, and should enable us to be even more efficient in satisfying members' needs. Significant progress was also made during the year on the modernisation of our IT infrastructure. There is still much to do, however, and work will continue over the next couple of years. And our sustainability programme is progressing really well. A lot has been going on over the last year. Measuring our bottle weights and carbon footprint, sending zero waste to landfill, launching our new approach to packaging and our responsible sourcing programme with suppliers, starting to implement our plans to become carbon neutral, and of course dealing with the ever-increasing amount of environmental legislation. And I should say that we regard it as fundamental that the Society implements its plans in the right way and that we are authentic in our claims and actions. We won't greenwash. So not profit, but quality, value, service, experience, and of course member satisfaction. I said we aim to maximise member satisfaction. And I'm pleased to say that this grew every quarter during last year and continues to rise this year and is currently the highest since we started measuring. Is all this too good to be true? Some members have actually said that when you take all these together, it just seems too good to be true. Well, our aim with your continued support is to make it even better. At the heart of our business, of course, are our people, whether the buyers, our drivers, those in member services, the shop or the warehouse. or marketing, finance, IT, HR, or other office jobs, mostly behind the scenes. Our success and member satisfaction with the society depends to an enormous degree on how you are treated by and the service you get from our people. I'm at Stevenage regularly, and it's quite clear that we have an extremely cohesive and positive team who are all dedicated to providing members with the best service they can. And I would like to thank each of them for their commitment and hard work over the past year. I would like to say a few words about Tim Wright, who died in an accident towards the end of last year. Tim joined the committee in 2014 and became deputy chair for 4 years. I've never come across anyone who did not immediately like him. He brought to the committee a zest for life and a real passion for society. A proud Yorkshireman with a self-deprecating sense of humour and an infectious smile. He dealt with life head-on and straightforwardly, and he was generous, insightful, supporting, encouraging, and when it was needed, really challenging. I miss him terribly. We miss him terribly. Looking ahead, next year, 2024, is the 150th anniversary of the Society, a wonderful milestone. We are already preparing to celebrate it in ways that will allow each member to participate, and we have some wonderful wines. We have also, over the past year, prepared a new strategy that will take the Society into the next 150 years. Our major investments are mostly behind us, and the strategy is focused on bringing prices even lower and bringing continuing improvements in wine, service, and member experience. Although there are obvious external challenges, this is a very exciting time for the Society and its members. Everyone in the Society is looking forward to it, and we hope the same is true for every member. I said our people are at the heart of our business, but our members are our lifeblood. Your support, your participation, your loyalty have allowed us to flourish for the past 150 years and will allow us to flourish for at least the next 150. The partnership between the Society and our members is at the very heart of the value of our difference. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say as an introduction. Let us move to any questions you may have. And let me explain how that will work, because this year it's quite complicated. Those in the room who want to ask a question, please raise your hands, and we have a team with microphones across the hall who will come to you when I identify you. This is being recorded and will be available on the website for everyone to see, so please give your name and speak into the microphone so that your question is able to be heard. While a microphone is wending its way towards the member I've identified in the hall, I'll take a question either from those we received in advance or from online, and then come back to that member for their question. Those online can put questions by following the instructions on the slide which appeared before the meeting and which is hopefully reappearing now. You may either type the question, and the team behind the scene here will transfer the questions to my screen, hopefully, and will attempt to group any similar questions together, so you may not hear your exact question. Or you can ask to speak directly to the meeting by selecting the Request to Speak button on your screen, when you'll be placed in a queue to ask your question directly to the meeting. Again, please give your name. And this year, for the first time, we provided members with the ability to email questions in advance of the meeting. 35 members sent in questions. Some we answered directly, and I've grouped the remaining questions into 12 categories. Our environmental sustainability plans, the defined benefit pension scheme, wine, change in the Society, strategy and performance, tastings and events, delivery, communications, packaging, other sustainability issues, the use of Amex, and exports. Whether we manage to get through all of those, as well as questions in the hall and online, I'm not sure. But if we don't, after the AGM, we will answer the questions in some way those we've not been able to deal with. And if you're unable to ask a question in the room because of time pressure, please feel free to send the question in afterwards. As usual, it would probably be appreciated by members if questions could be on topics which are likely to affect the membership generally. Any question which is more personal or simply seeks clarification of something could perhaps easily be asked outside the meeting. Could I now ask for questions? So, well, gentleman there, and whilst it's coming towards you, Steve, I'm going to ask you to answer one of the questions we have received online, or a series of questions on our environmental sustainability plans. Excuse me. Single bottle delivery and its impact, the cost, especially of emissions removal, and the three most important steps we've taken and their impact. Although I would mention that our sustainability review is on the website, and you can read all the actions we've taken and their impact. But Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And it was great to get so many questions directly related to our sustainability plan. The level of engagement from members has been really good. And actually, we're really pleased with the first year of implementing the plan. You know, we're at the stage now where 40% of our bottles are already lightweighted. You know, and hopefully by 2027, that's the target that we've got to lightweight all of our bottles. We're generating, by the end of the year, we'll be generating well over 50% of our electricity needs from our site in Stevenage when we've put solar panels onto Warehouse 5. And our site in Stevenage is now, fully recycled in the sense of being, a closed loop. We're not adding to our emissions from our own site. So it's been a good year, and we're doing an awful lot more as we look forward. We're looking at work around insetting, around regenerative viticulture, and hedgerows. We're looking at solutions for us and DHL around our fleets. Again, some quite ambitious plans. But alongside that, what we now know is that, we know the impact of our footprint and the impact of our operations because we've measured it. And we'll be measuring it again next year, and we'll be measuring it again the year afterwards to make sure that we're doing the things that we said we'd do. And our activities from a cost perspective will be in the region of, there'll be years when it might be lower, but in the region of $500,000 a year spent on these actions. But during the next strategy phase, in the next 5 years, all of those actions and activities will move into positive cash territory on the P&L and on the balance sheet. So actually we see this as good business rather than a drain on members' cash. In terms of single bottles and single bottle delivery, often when we've looked at our sustainability, then it's a conversation. Rather than something which is absolutely black and white. There's no doubt that single bottle deliveries add to our footprint, but actually, in our view, they only add to them in a relatively negligible way because we're using existing capacity in the industry. So there are no more vehicle movements as a result of the actions that we've taken. But we see providing better service to members as being a really important facet, and sometimes that does come at a cost. And that's why through our plan, what you'll see is that the carbon that we use will be looking at measures such as insetting to make sure that we're sequestering more carbon than we're emitting, and that'll actually have a positive benefit over time, enabling us to make more judgment calls about what we do. Yes, so we've also had a question saying, when are we going to put solar panels on Warehouse 5? So we deliberately built Warehouse 5 without solar panels. It's fully enabled, and we hope to be able to do it by the end of the year, if not early next year.
Thank you, Steve. Gentleman over there. Yep.
Thank you. Luke Douglas-Hume, I've just a quick question, but a little observation. First of all, I don't know whether I should thank you or not, but you have induced me to drink a colossal amount of Lebanese wine specifically, because 2 years ago, after the catastrophe in Beirut, you did a very good offer saying at cost price, here are the best Lebanese wines, and a great package, and you did brilliantly on that. Are you planning anything similar about Ukraine? I know nothing about Ukrainian wine. Likewise, I knew nothing about Lebanese wine, but now I'm addicted. So.
That's you, Pierre.
So let me broaden that question, if I may, because we had a few wine questions come in, which I was going to get Pierre to deal with. So we'll add that one to them. So the wine questions we had in advance were about UK bottled wines, why we didn't stock Georgian wines, why we didn't stock liqueurs, and from a lady who asked why we didn't have more lower alcohol red wine. She was 95 and she felt that lower alcohol red wines were what she needed. So I'm going to add Ukraine to that one as well. Pierre.
Yeah, thank you. So you're sitting down. I've got a lot to cover.
In 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes. Thank you very much for your comments about Lebanese wine. We do that sort of thing when we are trying to reflect an existing range of our wines. We don't currently buy from Ukraine, and that's because we just haven't discovered the best wines that tick our quality and value for money box. So we don't have any plans to do anything specific around Ukraine. In terms of the questions that have come up, so bulk shipping, we currently have 2 ranges of wines that we buy bulk shipped. That means we're shipping them over, not in bottles, but in massive bags, about 10,000 litre bags. Those ranges are called Fistful of Schist and Victory Hotel, South Africa and Australia. It's fair to say that's a very, very small percentage of our range. We have just trialled bag-in-box wines under the Society label, and that essentially is bulk shipping and bottling here, or bagging here in the UK. We expect to do more bulk shipping like this because there are significant benefits for the environment, because it takes an awful lot less energy to ship across the world. However, we just want to really satisfy ourselves both from a quality perspective, but also from an economic perspective, because we aren't as big as the supermarkets. We don't buy as much wine, so there are some economic considerations for us to look at. I doubt we will ever ship fine wines and have them bottled here, but for our regular sort of core running wines, I think we'll see much more of that in years to come. Question was on Georgia. Why don't we have any wines from Georgia? In fact, we do. We sell 4 wines, but we have not sold Georgian wines for a number of years. We now have 4 and representing the 2 sort of key styles, the best styles of Georgia, which are Saperavi and amber wines. But again, fair to say that consistency is not a word I would describe Georgia with in terms of quality. So expect that range to contract, expect it to grow. It's much more tactical in the way that we buy Georgian wines. Alcohol in red wines are going up, and that's partly climate change, but as bigger contributor is the fact that growers are just growing grapes much better. Vineyard techniques are much better, and that means that you get better quality, healthier fruit. It's why vintages tend to be more consistent nowadays. Does mean alcohol levels are higher. The average alcohol levels of places like Bordeaux is higher, but we buy wines based on balance. So you can have a wine at 12% alcohol that's out of balance, but a wine at 14.5% that's in balance, and that's very much our approach here. We do state alcohol levels on all of our printed material and online, because we do recognise that many members, for your buying decision, alcohol is a consideration. Liqueurs, the question is, why don't we have any liqueurs on our range? We do have liqueurs on our range. We've got 4 currently: Crème de Cassis, Triple Sec, Sloe Gin, and a Bailey's lookalike, but we aren't specialists in liqueurs. Again, this is a very sort of tactical part of our range. We're providing a number of products as a service to members. Have I covered everything?
So you have, except that there's one just come in, so I'm going to add it to you. Because given that there are some fine wines made in Israel, why does the Society offer none for sale?
Good question. We, at the moment, so we occasionally buy parcels from Israel. We've worked with a producer called Clodagat. But the value for money that we see coming out from Israel just isn't there. They're fine, that they make really good quality wines. But I think what they are very good at doing is keeping the best wines for themselves to drink domestically. And once they're exported, they just become too expensive. And they're growing the grapes, sort of international grapes. So we've got areas from other parts of the world that we think offer better value for money at the moment.
Thank you. There was a member over there with his hand up originally. Yes. You've got the microphone's coming to you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello, I'm Barry Sherman. I was here last year, and thank you very much because you're so close to Parliament. I can come across quite conveniently, so thanks for that bonus. I really enjoyed last year. Remember, I asked for belt and braces that we were safe for anyone greedy taking us over. We had a good response there. Thank you. Can I just say today, when I was a very young person, I read a wonderful book, The Plain Man's Guide to Wine, Raymond Postgate. And do you think in the Postgate, because we've got 150 years coming up, our educational role about wine, sensible wine drinking, are we doing enough educational work? You know, Raymond Postgate not only wrote that book, he started a Good Food Guide, and wonderful things. Should we be doing more educational stuff around the wine society? Most universities and other institutions are asked today about their impact on the broader social life of our country. Could we do a little extra in the 150 years next year? Thank you.
That's a super question. It's something we have been talking about. So, Pierre, do you want to
Sure.
take that?
I'm really pleased you've asked that question because the new 5-year strategy that kicks off next year has as one of its main pillars education. And actually, I think we've got to a really good place around what our vision for education is. And that is for us to create our own, let's call it a syllabus, although I don't like to use those words, because what we want to do is inform members through tasting sessions to learn more about wine, but in a joyful way. We recognise that good WSET, which is the sort of industry trade standard, they do great certifications. I know many members do those. We're not going to do those because turned me off wine, and our job is not to turn members off wine. We want to do it in a wine society way. So we've got a bit more work to do there in terms of designing what it looks like, but it's going to be education that you'll learn and have fun with and look really smart in front of your friends.
Thanks, Pierre. Other questions? There was one over there on my left. Yes, the microphone's coming to you.
Yes, Paul Burnham. Are there any plans to reintroduce the 25 pence a bottle collection discount for people collecting from Stevenage? And if not, why not?
Steve, I think that's one for you.
Yeah, no, there are no plans to reintroduce it, and I know it sort of created, some noise with local members, and there's two reasons really. Number one, it was actually surprisingly burdensome, and the second element is just the equity. You know, we believe very much in fairness, and actually it didn't feel right to subsidise members locally when other members didn't have the opportunity to take that up.
Thank you. Other questions from the room? There's a hand up there, but before we go to you, I'm going to ask Emily to deal with a question that came in advance on pensions. A couple of members wanted to know why in our accounts it appears that there's an £885,000 loss on the defined benefit pension scheme. I can assure you there isn't a loss, but I'll let Emily tell you why.
Thank you, Alan. So the pension scheme was actually in a surplus position at the end of the year. However, we don't recognise that surplus position on our balance sheet, as there's no reasonable expectation that we'd be entitled to receive any refund of surplus if one existed in the event of a winding up of the scheme. We paid contributions to the scheme in the year, which were agreed as part of a schedule of contributions in 2020. And because we pay those contributions, we must offset them in some way so that the balance sheet position remains at nil. That loss that you've seen recorded in the statement of other comprehensive income enables that balance sheet position to stay at nil. We are really delighted that our pension scheme is in really good health, and we're nearing a point where Wine Society contributions will no longer be needed. For the first time, the Society is able to plan ahead for longer-term scheme security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman just down here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Davis, 223706. I've been a member for a number of years, and during that time, I developed a habit of creating a credit balance for Christmas purchases because they're always much larger than normal. However, the current procedure is that all credit balances must be utilised first in current positions. So I did get a letter I wrote several letters and I got one back from you. Unfortunately, it was undated, unsigned, although there was a name at the bottom, 4 letters, U and an H in it. I can't remember the name. But it did hint you were discussing the situation as to whether you would allow the development of credit balances. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has to build up rather than rely on 1 month's pension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve, you...
So this is another component of our new strategy. So one of the things that we needed to do, part of the reason that we've actually made it a little bit difficult at the moment, is just in order to create more financial security. It's not great practice to allow people to run up credit balances unless it's part of a formalised scheme, and we didn't have one of those. We will have one of those. It might take a couple of years to get up and running, but it's absolutely the heart of what we want to do in the new strategy is to enable members to build up credit, but in their own way. So we're not planning, whilst we might link some of this to our subscription schemes, actually we prefer members to have the flexibility to build up credit the way they want to build up credit. And then we'll either assist members with purchases or members will be able to do that themselves. So it's a central part of our strategy. I'd hesitate to call it a wine bank because somebody else has got one of those, but we'll find a suitable name for it when we get it up and running.
There's a gentleman with a question down there. Before I go to you, I'm going to answer a couple of questions that came in advance. 2 members asked about what they perceived was a change in the society. One, that we were now too commercial, and the other, that we were no longer cheaper than competitors because of ballooning overheads. And one of the examples was that why do buyers travel abroad when they can essentially do that from home? So my answer is, have we changed, become too commercial, no longer cheaper than competitors? I hope from my introduction it became clear that I just don't think that's true. We're definitely a members' organisation. No action is taken by the executive or the committee that doesn't have an extraordinary length of discussion about what it means for members. We can't sell to anyone else. If we don't keep our members happy, we go out of business. And I believe we provide the best value, and I believe we provide the cheapest wines of equivalent quality. The Society was founded so that lovers could try international wines at the fairest prices 150 years ago. And I don't believe anything's changed other than we have domestic wines now, happily, and we have 21st century technology, infrastructure, and service. Times change and members expect more, and we have to move with that. So I don't think we have to be, as a members' organisation, an amateur organisation. We have to be professional and efficient and ensure that you get the best service. As for the buyers still travelling, the quality of our wines comes from the buyers actually being with the growers in the vineyards, tasting wines and seeing what's new. They did wonderfully during lockdown, but it demonstrated the difficulties with them not being able to go and see the buyers. And I talk to the buyers constantly, and their faces just light up when they're able to go to the vineyard and see what's being developed and seeing what's new. So far from turning a members' organisation into a purely commercial one. I don't believe we do. And I believe that our professional approach is actually demanded by members. It's what members deserve. And I think it's the only way we'll be able to flourish for another 150 years. Gentleman down there.
Thank you. My name is John Bridcut. I wonder if there are any plans to extend the Wine Society delivery. You currently deliver to Northern Ireland, but not to the Republic, I believe. And I hope, there's personal interest in this, I hope that it might be possible, for instance, for my daughter, who is a member of the Wine Society, to be able to get wines delivered in Dublin.
Thank you. Actually, we received a couple of questions on delivery in advance, on delivery performance, and there's one also that's coming online, and how we deal with failed deliveries, and also one as to whether we're continuing with our own vans. So, Steve, I wonder if you might deal with, and sorry, I should say also some questions on export of wines to other countries. So actually, if you could deal with all those.
So first one's first is that, no, at this stage, we haven't got any plans to extend beyond the UK borders. We still have our collection facility in Newry, which most members in the Republic who choose to use us then collect from. But it's very, very complex. And the answer to that is also, in large part, the answer to the export question as well, where a number of members have said, you know, we wrote to members recently who live abroad saying that we were no longer offering our export service. And it's for the same reason, whether it's in the EU or whether it's outside. The amount of effort and the amount of cost that we have to expend relative to the benefit, again, we took the view that it wasn't in the interests of membership as a whole. But we took it with one big proviso, which is anybody living anywhere in the world can have a UK address with a freight forwarder and have their and still order and have their wine delivered, as long as we can deliver it somewhere in the UK for onward shipment. But of course, you know, today, and particularly for Europe, it's got harder and harder to act as an exporter. And for those organisations that do it at scale, it's worth it. For us, I'm afraid, it isn't. Then we've got the question about our own fleet. So we have extended our own fleet. So our own fleet of vans is not under threat. We've extended it now to 37 vans, which means that we can deliver to 80% of postcodes in the UK. That's probably about as much as we think we can do. But having said that, over the last 12 months, our performance has been very up and down, and that is due to the competition in the driver market. So we've got some places, you know, if you live in Yorkshire, for example, where we've nearly hired 3 or 4 drivers. We've actually hired 2 or 3 drivers who never showed up for the first day at work because it's so competitive. But I think we're stabilised now, and I think you should see a significant improvement in the second half of the year. For those of you that have an issue with DHL, I do understand that, and I'm fully aware of all of the reasons why people get so irritated when their order from DHL doesn't show up. I think Alan said earlier that actually their delivery performance is every bit as good as our own vans, but almost because they're a carrier rather than the much-loved society drivers, actually from a member satisfaction perspective, they score lower. But the key point with DHL is that we recognise that no carrier is perfect, and therefore we only have one carrier so that we can work really closely with them. So we're well aware of some of the geographical variances. We had an issue in the southwest a couple of years ago, which is an area where they subcontract. They've tightened that up now. We know we have some issues in the south of England. So we really are. We've got a fantastic team in Stevenage who are all over this, and we know that we optimise, you know, where we can. But where we can't, I hope members find that our member services team do a brilliant job in trying to recover the situation. And believe me, I've had letters from members over the last 4 weeks where, you know, actually they've had multiple failures. and but actually have come back to me afterwards to say how well our team have performed. So we'll do our best to mitigate it, but I'm afraid I can't stop it happening, but we'll do our very best. We do have some interesting things on the horizon with DHL, not immediately, they're not going to come quickly, but having said that, they recognise their shortfalls. There's an epidemic in the carrier industry with drop and go. When you're sitting behind the door waiting for somebody to knock on the door and then you find the delivery outside the front door. That is a bit of an epidemic in the carrier industry as a whole. It's not just us. And we're looking at ways in which we can improve time slotting and improve communication around deliveries. So we really are trying our very hardest to make this work well for members.
Thank you, Steve. Paddle number 2, question right at the back.
Hello, Lynn Piercy. You mentioned in your talk the efforts that the Society makes to keep price increases to a minimum, for which, of course, we're all extremely grateful. How do you balance that with paying our wine suppliers sustainable prices when they too will be faced with cost pressures?
That's a very good question, Steve.
Well, it's a fantastic question, actually, because I would imagine with the duty increases coming up, some of the worst practices in the industry are probably at play in terms of trying to get suppliers to reduce cost prices. We don't. We have a very grown-up relationship with our suppliers, and the measures that Alan talked about earlier on are the measures we've taken internally. You know, so we will put ourselves under pressure. We won't compromise the speed at which we pay suppliers, and we certainly won't be beating them over their head for reduction in cost prices that they can't afford. You know, and it's worth saying that, you know, we've seen cost price increases in wine is still a relatively new thing, actually. So for most of last year, it wasn't the cost of wine that went up, it was the cost of many other aspects of inflation. With vintage change this year, cost prices have gone up quite a lot. And for anybody who's been interested in the top wines of Bordeaux, some of those prices have been quite steep. But, you know, this is where we would prefer to put our P&L under huge strain in order to make sure that we're not passing on either inflationary or duty increases to members. Some wines will have come down in price as a result of the duty changes, so some sparkling and low alcohol wines, and you can expect us to put our prices down from August 1st on those wines. I don't think many people will be doing that, but none of this is at the expense of suppliers.
Thank you. I think I saw a hand right at the back on the far side there. Someone can go where near for. Yes, thank you.
Oh, hi. My name is Peter Heilbrunn. I've been a member for 12 years. I joined basically word of mouth from a friend, and in the intervening 12 years, I've also brought some members to the Society, word of mouth. Clearly, it's a very positive and useful way, but I just wondered what the Society does in order to attract new members, because all your marketing, obviously, is directed at us, the members. I don't actually see any other marketing, advertising in papers or anywhere. I see Laithwaite's leaflets through the door, God knows how often a month. So I just wondered what you're doing in order to attract, because if there's a pressure on sales, the only way to mitigate that is to have more people buying.
That's something we talk about very regularly. Steve?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And actually, the motivator for us to acquire new members is honestly less sales-driven, and it's much more actually the sustainability of the membership as a whole, because our membership is getting a little bit older. And we do have a challenge which we're going to have to face into over the next few years to either maintain or slightly bring down that average age. And the challenge for us is a really simple one, actually. It is a very, very expensive exercise to recruit new members. And we are competing with organisations who are prepared to spend £20 million plus every year on purely on acquisition. Which clearly is not a great use of members' money. So we just have to be a little bit different. So we are working through our PR team to make sure that actually we have much higher visibility in the places that members who look like you are reading or shopping. And the second element is that we also have to continue that process of member get member. It's a very fertile way of recruiting, and this year we'll bring in the region of 14 to 15,000 members that way. Now, the downside is against our measures, because we measure lapsing members on those who have purchased from us within a year. So that number will be somewhat higher than the 14,000 that we bring in. So it's a balance of reactivating members who previously lapsed. It's about reducing lapsing, which is in our hands with our members. And it's about just turning the dial up a little bit more in terms of recruiting externally new members, but without betting the farm on it, without spending too much money.
Thank you. There's a lady here, but just whilst you're going over, I'm going to ask Pierre to take one that's come in online. Is there anything the Wine Society can do to stop producers putting capsules on their bottles? If it's good enough for Joel Peterson to sell Once and Future without a capsule, surely it's good enough for everyone. This particular person has cut her finger on the foil ones a couple of times a year, and the plastic ones are just more landfill.
Yes. Actually, there is a lot that we're already doing, but before I explain what we are doing, capsules serve absolutely no purpose beyond presentational, except for screw caps. So the plastic or the lead that goes over the top of the top of the bottle, it really was initially put on there, actually not presentational. It was because filling machines historically filled quite inconsistently, so it prevented consumers from seeing the different levels of wine. But yeah, so capsules play absolutely no role. With the relabeling of the new labels of our society range, we took the decision that for all wines that are under normal closures, whether that's cork or technical corks, we've removed the capsules. So we had a stat shared with us last week, actually, that the Society's Claret, which is pretty much our top-selling red wine, we've worked out that by removing the capsule on that, by the end of this year, that will have taken out 0.5 ton of plastic from the Society. That's the equivalent of half a Mini. So we've started with own label, and we will undoubtedly continue to influence other producers as well, because it really does play no role.
Thanks, Pierre. That lady there.
Thank you. Sheila Page. Can you say something about what you're doing to improve the performance of the web? First, in terms of having real-time stock showing. It's extremely disappointing to make an order, have the money taken, get a date for delivery confirmed, and then be told it's not in stock. Secondly, for some months now, my Sauterne in reserves have been showing as Bordeaux, which is a slightly unconventional way of describing them. So that there really do seem to be some problems when things are taken au non-primeur, arrive and go into reserves. For a while, the website seems to go crazy for the week while this is happening. Can anything be done to improve the website?
Thank you. So I'm also going to include with that a question that's just come in. When will the new Society website be made fully functional? The important wine reviews are still not visible. And the question is, are there any plans for the Wine Society to launch an app in the near future? For members like myself, this would really help rapid access of information. So if you deal with those...
So, and there's, and thank you, Alan, and thank you for the question. So the first element, when Alan talked about all of the work that we've been doing on our IT and infrastructure, we've got one major project left, which actually relied on all of the others to be done, which is changing our basic operating system for the business. So, you know, that's quite a big deal, you know, something called an ERP, And that project is underway, and when that is complete, then actually our core fundamentals will be in really good shape, and that will give us things like real-time stock balance. You know, so there are reasons why we haven't at the moment, and actually it's just the order at which we've had to modernise the business. Doesn't happen very often, but it happens enough to be really annoying when a wine is obviously ordered in stock and then shows up as not available. So we do get it, and we're working on it as quickly as we can. The website as a whole, obviously we replatformed a couple of years ago. And subsequent to that, we've been doing a fair few releases. We had a big time out when we moved to pay up front, which was a requirement, so we had to do that. And now we're back into the cycle where we're improving the website. You know, for example, we've got another 4 releases, which will add functionality and improvement between now and the end of the year. And then another major release early next year, which will continue the process. The order in which we're doing them, though, is not always a popular order, but it does have logic behind it, which is we took the page views from the old site, and actually the reviews page, which is on the backlog and it will get done, was one of the lowest used pages on the entire site. So there is a logic to why we're doing it the way that we're doing it, which obviously for those of you that really like the way in which we collected all of the reviews together, but we're trying to get as many of those done this year as we can before the big release next year. In terms of the app, what we've focused on for the last 2 or 3 years has been making sure that our mobile experience is as good as it can be. You know, and actually our mobile site is incredible. Actually, it's highly optimized, won a lot of awards, and it's in really good shape. Whether we add an app to that or not is something that we're still discussing. We might add apps as a means of providing information, you know, and Pierre talked about our planned programs around education. They may serve an app well, but actually while we've got a mobile site that works as well as it does, it's very unlikely we'll introduce a transactional app.
Thank you, Steve. Question in the middle there.
Hi, Sandro Kocakidze. Want to ask about the wine retail market and developments. You briefly mentioned the changing buying habits of the customers, that the basket declined in volume but increased in value. And specifically, also want to ask how the buying habits and the behavior of the Wine Society members differ from your 2 closest competitors, and what's your strategy to navigate that?
They get cheaper wines.
And for the disclosure, I am Georgian, but I didn't ask that question. I knew the answer in advance.
Steve.
Yeah, I mean, so we did have a question actually that came through beforehand about facts on membership. So before I address the question specifically, one of the things that Rach, our head of marketing, and I are talking about at the moment is doing something in an 1874 that gives you more insight to the membership, who the membership are, what the membership are doing, and so on, because we actually think that would be of general interest to people, including things like consumption rates, for example. So consumption rates were somewhat higher during COVID, as you might have expected. Then they came down. Now they're slowly climbing back up again, so I don't quite know what that means. But it's very difficult. I mean, what we try to do is to make ourselves as different as possible from our competitive. You know, it's where Alan titled it The Value of Our Difference. Actually, the best route for us is to be quite counterintuitive. So at a time when costs are going up and duties going up, we'll lower our prices. You know, at times when people are trying to have the lowest possible cost for delivery, we'll increase the size of our own fleet. And we'll do those things in order to be counterintuitive, but in a very positive way for members and in a very positive way for the society as a whole. It is very easy to order and buy wine remotely, but it bears no relation to the quality of the conversation and the relationship that you build up in the vineyard. So there's a whole host of things that we do very differently to our competitors. In terms of purchasing characteristics, since we moved to next day delivery as standard, you've all got used to taking the earliest available delivery slot, and therefore where we might have seen deliveries building up over 5, 10, 15 days. Actually, we see a really big steep cliff, and we've got to make sure that we're pulling the orders in behind that. But I think Alan's mentioned this. The thing that we really have to do is, alongside, it's no good anymore just being the society that does things in a different way, and members forgive us for having slow delivery, members forgive us for, mucking things up and so on. We have to be a modern, vibrant online retailer, and I think we've done a lot to move in that direction over the last few years. And then, actually, by doing all of those things well, the value of our difference really starts to show through.
And Steve, before I go to the gentleman of the question, there came in advance some questions relating to the performance of the society, which I thought would be useful just to add to that. So someone said, why was sales down on 2021? Were costs up? What were the main challenges to our survival? The importance of our subscription services. I think they were the other three issues on our performance and our strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, you will have seen from the financial accounts this year that actually, yes, our sales did go down and our costs did go up. The main reason for that is that we were comparing with a record year while we had COVID and everybody was in lockdown, dare I say, slowly pickling ourselves. So that was always going to be a tough gig to keep up with the rate of sale from 21. What we do is we look at our costs as a percentage of net sales and we compare that. We really are now ignoring 20 and 21 because they will turn out to be just exceptional years. And actually, we're seeing those costs come down as a percentage. Our costs anyway, benchmarked against the industry, are in the lower quartile. So we're in no means a fat business, but we can be more productive. And this change that I talked about in our operating system will start to unlock some of those efficiencies in the same way that Warehouse 5, we've added huge capacity with Warehouse 5, but we're spending no more money on as a result of having that facility, and we've saved close to £1 million on outside storage costs. So we're working always to try and make ourselves as efficient as possible. What was the second question?
The main challenges to our survival and our subscription services.
Well, from a survival perspective, it's really simple, actually. We need to make sure that we're bringing sales in at a sustainable level, that we're controlling costs, and then we're regenerating the membership as well. So that's what, that's a real key driver for me and my team in terms of how we approach things. But obviously, we've got to do it quickly enough, but at a sensible pace that means that we don't change the nature of the society and who we are. But it's a very difficult balance sometimes. And as a consequence of that, we've also got to keep on regenerating our strategy. So I think I've talked about subscription a little bit, that we're looking for something that's much more flexible, that's much more user-friendly for members and much more driven by members. Pierre's talked about education. We'll be looking at innovations in wine. We'll be looking at some very exciting innovations in wine, actually, but I'm not going to tell you what they are yet. We'll be looking at education, as Pierre said. We'll be looking at all of our propositions. People hold a lot of reserves with us, and at the moment, yes, we've introduced more flexibility. Yes, it's the cheapest, but actually it should be a really joyful thing for members, and we can do a lot more, particularly online, to make it so. So we're really moving from a position where we've been focusing on spending big on our modernisation, so £30-odd million over the last 3 or 4 years. And this strategy is now about putting members truly front and centre, and everything that we do will have a member benefit associated with it.
Thank you. I know we started a little later, so I don't mind going on a little later, but I'm sure everyone would like to get through to the tasting. So I'd like to try and draw the questions to a close. There's 2 questions down here. You've already asked one, so I'm going to go to the gentleman there first, just beside you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Martin Melville, 71028. It really relates to 2 that have gone before. I recently, because of the Chancellor, decided to move a number of cases from duty-free to duty-paid. Did that. Then they said, buy some. But I had a credit balance, so you wouldn't charge me any money. You took it out the money that I'd just given you. Can you not do something about that?
Well, I think it's
Pass is the answer. We have had a niggle over the last. Actually, I can't remember when we fixed it, but we did have a niggle with credit balances. So it's entirely possible that some members have seen some movement on their credit balance in the same way that some members actually saw that they had a credit balance outstanding when in fact they hadn't, because the system moved the money to the wrong place. So these are all issues that have been solved. But catch me after and I'll have a look at it in more detail. But, you know, all websites have niggles like this from time to time. But ours, we suffer a little bit more than most because, again, the operating system that we're replacing dates back to 1998. So you can just imagine what that system was like over many years and what a new modern operating system will mean for us. So that's the explanation. So the handoff between systems has made some mistakes, but we've actually done a pretty good job on the whole of mitigating some of those, and we're now impatient to get this new system live and up and running.
Before going to this gentleman who's asked before, we've just received one member who'd like to ask a question from online directly to the meeting, and since that will be the first time that's ever done, I think we should go to that first. So it's from Mr. Bailey. So Mr. Bailey, I hope if you speak now, we will all be able to hear you.
Thank you. I hope you can. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Yeah. Yes, yeah? We can. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just got to say, I'm a bit disappointed with the explanation about why you don't have an app. About 15 minutes ago, we had one of the panel saying the future of the society was to make it more attractive to the younger cohort. And at the same time, we've got someone on the panel saying, well, actually, we've got such a good mobile site, we don't need an app. And I feel that's a complete contradiction. The reality is nobody under 50 is really, or 40 certainly, is going to be particularly interested in an organisation that doesn't have an app they can access, a transactional app, from their telephone. And I just think it's all very well, we've got a panel sat there of, you know, 3 elderly white gentlemen, very noble and everything else, but totally what the younger people want. The younger people want an app. And the work I do for a market research company, a business which we did some work for recently, they were losing business from younger people and not gaining customers. And the reason was quite simply that they only had a web presence, they didn't have an app. I think the society needs not only a transactional app, I think it needs to have a really good transactional app so that younger people will feel encouraged to use it.
Thank you. That's very kind. And thank you for your question. Steve.
So I never said never, but on the same basis. What you might be interested in is so our traffic is dominant on mobile, and our traffic is dominant on mobile with young people. So I would refute the idea that you need an app in order to have young people shop on what is a terrifically enabled site.
Thank you. So I hope the last question, I can't see too many hands up, is the gentleman who's been waiting patiently there.
Luke Douglas-Hume, don't worry everyone, this will be the shortest answer to this question in the history of questions. This is probably a sort of silly but very short question. What's the average per annum case consumption per member regarding your sales issue earlier?
So you mean in total from the membership?
Yeah, one member.
The average.
Yeah, the average is just over 5 cases per year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So I would like, therefore, to draw the questions to a close. I assume everyone's now thinking where they sit on that average. And whether this evening will make a difference to that. Let's now move to the agenda items, and let me explain how that will work. So, voting. Voting will take place in the room by members using the devices they were given as they registered. I'm now told there are 500 members in the room, which I'm sure must be a record, with 247 online, together with an estimated 100 guests in the room. So 850 members here. That's excellent, here and online. So in the room, and I apologise for how fiddly they are, but if you want to vote in favour of a proposal, please press the number 1. And if you want to vote against, please press the number 2. And behind me on the screen is a picture showing where the 1 and the 2 are. For those who may need their reading specs. If you think you've not voted the way you intended, you can simply change your vote by pressing the 1 or the 2. Those online can vote following the instructions on your screen. And I will ask you to vote on a resolution, and then after allowing a few moments for you all to vote, we'll announce the closing of the vote. I'm told that there is a 10-second delay between what you hear in the hall and what you hear online, which is just built in. So when I open the vote here, and when I close the vote here, the timing will differ, but you will both have exactly the same amount of time. But I'll just have to wait a few seconds longer to close the vote. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the accounts, and members are asked to adopt the accounts for last year, and I would be grateful if you could indicate whether you are happy to do so by pressing the 1 for and 2 for against. And in theory, yeah. Thank you. I can see roughly how we're going here.
Nice watching you in real time.
I think that's... I'm seeing real time what's happening, so I can see a few votes still coming in, which is why I'm just waiting for it to finish. So I'm going to close the vote now, and the votes are, wait a couple of seconds for the online to finish. The votes are 571 in favour and 2 against. So I can... I can declare so that resolution has been, the accounts have been adopted. Thank you. The second item is the co-option of Catherine Nunn. Under Rule 27, the committee co-opts members onto the committee, subject to confirmation of those appointments at the next AGM. Catherine was co-opted onto the committee on the 25th of January 2023 for a term of 1 year. We usually do them 1 year, then extend if necessary. She was the chief executive and is now the deputy chair of Lakeland, the kitchenware specialist retailer. With a career over 25 years in retail, Catherine brings a real wealth of experience to the committee. So could I ask you to confirm Catherine's co-option from that date? Please now vote. That's much speedier. Thank you. The time for voting has now ended. I wait my 10 seconds. and the meeting has confirmed Catherine Nunn's co-option by 564 for and 11 against. The third item is the re-election of Ken Brown and the election of Jenny Farmer. Ken was first co-opted onto the committee in 2016 and elected in 2018, and he's retiring by rotation into standing for re-election. Ken is the chair of the Finance and Risk Subcommittee and is the committee's senior independent director. He has more than 30 years' experience in investment banking and accountancy, as well as board experience in e-commerce. Jenny Farmer was appointed by the committee in March 2023 as an elected member to fill the vacancy arising on the retirement of Tim Wright. Pursuant to Rule 26.2, Jenny is retiring and is standing for election. Jenny is the Chief Marketing Officer for the Office Group, a flex workspace company, and she's over 20 years' experience in retail businesses, including beauty, jewellery, furniture, and wine. No other member standing for an elected member. As an elected member, I'm delighted to confirm Ken and Jenny's election. And finally, committee remuneration. Pursuant to Rule 40, committee members, other than the Chief Executive, are paid the fees from time to time decided by the General Meeting. The fee structure is slightly convoluted, and it's something we are looking at to see if we can make it more straightforward and more sensible, while also being fair and appropriate for members. At present, the chair and the deputy chair receive a fixed amount, and the other elected members receive a share of a maximum figure, which is shared between them based essentially on attendance at committee and subcommittee meetings. If anyone doesn't attend a meeting, the relevant amount is not earned and is not shared among the other members of the committee. So most years, the aggregate amount paid to the other elected members is usually less than the maximum, since there is likely to be the odd absence from a meeting for one reason or another. And co-opted members receive a fee at the same rate per meeting as elected members. Last year, the chair received £40,056, the deputy £20,028, and the maximum amount available to be shared among the other elected members was £48,735. It's been the practice in recent years to increase the fees in line with the increase awarded to staff in the annual pay review. For this year, therefore, it's proposed that an increase of 6%, the same increase as was awarded to staff, be applied to each category of fees for the year ending January 2024. And I would be grateful if you could now indicate whether you are happy to approve this. Please now vote. Thank you. The time for voting has now ended. And I can confirm that the proposal is carried by 533 votes and 42 against. That concludes the business of the meeting, and I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and declare the meeting closed. I would now ask Pierre to tell us a little about the wines for this evening. Thank you.
I promise not to keep you long. I can tell you're thirsty. Before I introduce tonight's tasting, I just want to cover some things that are happening in wine from the Society's perspective, many things that actually have been the themes of the questions tonight, but some information that I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into. It's been a really busy year for the buying team, and probably one of the most rewarding years. And three things really have been our priority: preparing for the 150th next year, finding additions to the wine range, and motivating our growers with our sustainability goals. I'll come back to the last two themes in a moment. And I'm afraid you're going to have to wait 6 months to hear more about the 150th, unless you get me at the end of the tasting tonight. You know, I might be a bit loose-tongued. We've got some really exciting plans for next year, of course. It's not been plain sailing for wine drinkers this year. Duty on wine increases in a few weeks. Most still wines are going to attract a duty of £2.67 per bottle. That's an increase of 44p. Fortified wine, an increase of 97p for sherry and £1.30 for port. Fortunately, as you've heard this evening, for members, the Wine Society is going to be absorbing these increases for the vast majority of our wines. And of course, as well, you've heard this evening, we will not buy inferior quality wines in order to meet a price point. Every wine we sell has to taste great. Now to the Society's sustainability goals, which are creating quite a bit of positive noise, both with our growers, but also within the trade here in the UK. It's further cementing our reputation as a business that does things thoroughly, professionally, and collaboratively, thanks to the well-thought plan being led by our Director of Sustainability and Social Impact, Dom DeVille, along with Simon Mason, who heads up wine sustainability in the buying team. They're both here this evening and have a table dedicated to some sustainable wines, or packaging, I should say, for tonight's tasting. What I like about our sustainability plan is that it emphasises action. When the Society says it will do something, it means it. With each piece of activity in our sustainability plan directly aimed at reducing our carbon footprint. We now know that glass accounts for 31%. That's the biggest contributor of our emissions. 40% of our range is already in lightweight bottles, and we're aiming to get this down to 100% within a few years. This is going to remove around 720 tonnes of glass, which is around 600 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions. That's the equivalent of driving 360,000 litres of diesel, driving 1.8 million miles. So we're really taking action here. We've already made changes to the Society's own label range, the wines which members buy the most of. And I hope that you all like the new labels. You saw some of the slides earlier. I think they create a much more sort of consistent family feel for our Society range. They're easier to recognise, and they do justice to the quality of the wine inside the bottle. At the same time, we've reduced the weight of our Society bottles, and as I mentioned earlier, we've removed capsules on many of the wines where we can. We've also trialled bag-in-box, and were overwhelmed by the interest from members. The 6 wines we trialled sold out in weeks. Most are now back in stock. The environmental impact of bag-in-box is better than glass, and the buyers have been tasting the wines regularly, comparing with the bottle versions, and I'm happy to report that they do taste just as good in bag-in-box. They also look really good, and they fit neatly into your fridge. Perhaps bolder is our second trial in a few weeks, and this time with recycled PET plastic bottles. Why PET? Because they have a significantly lower carbon footprint than single glass bottles. But they also have less of a track record with wine. So we're going to want to satisfy ourselves and members that there's no impact at all on quality, and only then, and assuming members continue to buy them, will we include them as a permanent fixture in our range. Remember the Pepsi challenge? We've got one here for you tonight, because we've got some of the plastic bottles here that were bottled 2 weeks ago. On the sustainability table, Simon and Dom are doing a bit of a Pepsi challenge to see if you can see the difference between the different, same wine under the different formats. So we'd really like to get your feedback. With all the change, it's fair to say that we've been demanding a lot from our growers and winemakers. These changes require more information on every wine we sell, thousands in a year. Plus, there's an increase in compliance to sell wine here in the UK, which means more process, more red tape. You could argue making the UK a bit of a less attractive nation to export wine to. We recognise this, and our stance is really to help our producers overcome these challenges so they continue to regard the Wine Society as a great and easy organisation to work with. Earlier, I referred to the Society as always saying what we mean. We choose our words carefully to describe our wines, and we will always be transparent in our assessment. This year's En Primeur campaigns, I think, are a really good case in point. At the beginning of the year, we featured the 21 vintage from Burgundy and the Rhone, a vintage that had challenges in France. From the Burgundy 2021 offer, Toby describes the wines as pretty, medium-bodied wines. And he goes on to say, as ever, in the most challenging years, the best growers and older vines have performed well above the average level. No hyperbole there. Do a Google search on the 2021 Burgundy En Primeur and have a look at what other merchants have said about 2021 Burgundy. I mention it because it's a pertinent example how the Wine Society, with no external shareholders to please, without the commercial pressures of other organisations, means that we can be truthful and authentic in our quality assessments. So when Tim Sykes described the 22 Bordeaux as one that ranks among the finest of the past 50 years, you sit up and take note. So if you're interested in stocking up your inventory of fine wines, then this is one to do so. The print campaign, I think, has just gone live this week. Tim's here. I happened to join him for a couple of days of tasting. The 22 Bordeaux wines really are superb. Now to the agenda item that you've been sitting very patiently for, palates at the ready, tonight's tasting. Such constant evolution of our wine range makes being a Wine Society buyer a privilege and a joy. The inventiveness of the winemakers we work with means there's been no shortage of new discoveries. And this is really the basis of the wines for tonight's tasting. All of the wines are new to the Society or were introduced as new to the Society earlier this year. We've got whites from Portugal and Italy, two countries making great strides with white wines. A Malbec from a new producer in Argentina, a cracking blend from Australia, and also a new producer to us, a German Weissburgunder, which demonstrates the rise in quality of Germany's dry white wines. And we finish with a mature 13-year-old Gran Reserva Rioja. We also feature some of the new additions to the own label range. A Zinamavro from Greece under the exhibition label, a Chardonnay from France, a wacky and delicious unfortified still wine that is aged like sherry, but is not from Jerez. It's really something that you should all try this evening. The aperitif is a zesty Austrian Riesling under the Society's label, a first for us. When you move to the next room, the tasting notes contain more details behind each of the wines. Just so you're aware, wine number 5 we launched as new in April, and it was so popular that I found out today that it's now sold out. So it's here for you to taste. I guess that because it's sold out so quickly, we will certainly be looking at the follow-on vintage. The buyers are all here this evening, so do please come and ask us any questions, any feedback on the wines. Before you leave the room, can you leave your voting devices on your chair? And finally, not that I think you'll need any encouragement, we'd be grateful if you could make your way promptly to the tasting. Thank you.
Good evening, members. My name is Catherine from the Tastings and Events team at the Wine Society, and I'll be leading this evening's online AGM tasting. We've got a selection of 6 wines that we'll be trying through this evening, and if you have your tasting pack, or perhaps you've bought some of the bottles, I hope you'll be joining me in trying them. However, if you've already started, I don't blame you. There's some really exciting wines that we're trying, and as Pierre mentioned at his speech at the end of the AGM that we've just heard, these are all new additions to our range, whether that is new grape varieties, new producers, or new styles of using grapes that we may be familiar with in other concepts. If you do have any questions as we are going through the tasting, please do use the same question format that you had for the AGM. The only difference is that it will be for typed questions only. We won't be taking questions verbally over the dial-in function. Now, let's get started on our first wine. It's a very exciting wine. So it is the Society's Austrian Riesling 2022 vintage. It's got our own new label style on the front there, a nice little goat, which I'll tell you more about as we go. And it's a really exciting wine, mainly because it is our newest own label Society wine. So this is really fresh to our range, and it is very fresh as a style as well. So if you do have it, I'd recommend that you pour it into your glass now, if you've not already done so. Oops, just lost my notes, bear with me. So I have it here in my glass already, in true Blue Peter style. And let's just take a bit of a sniff together. We'll do a bit of a guided tasting, but I'll let you think about what you think of the wine first. Hopefully, like me, you'll find that it's really zesty on the nose. It's very crisp scented of lemon, lime. There is some riper fruit there as well, and a slight minerality, which is one of those fun words that we like to use in wine tastings that can mean all manner of things. But sometimes, as here, it's a slight hint of a chalkiness, maybe a little pebbly note, which may be trickier to get on the nose at first, but on tasting, hopefully that will come through for you. If you want to take a taste, please do. I'm going to. And on the palate, hopefully you'll find it as having that carrying through of those citrus flavours, really fresh. It's making my mouth water. It's quite puckering, actually. And that precise acidity is something that really marks out Riesling as a grape variety. Being an Austrian Riesling, it is slightly different to those found in Germany. Those can be a little bit riper of fruits, a little bit more perfumed, whereas this has a little bit more precision to it, a little bit more of a linear quality. But it also has some really nice blossomy notes, so some orange blossom there, and a hint of something a little bit more perfumed, so something like a quince that is fleshy and can be a bit austere when it isn't quite ripe, but when it is, it really comes across beautifully and there's this lovely perfumed quality to it. So as I said, it's our newest own label wine, and it is also a new winner of the Decanter World Wine Awards 2023. It won gold only a month or so ago, so really, really an exciting one to be having. It's actually what the in-person tasting has had as the aperitif as well. So we've steered away from using a sparkling wine this year. We've gone for a still. And it really shows how you can use Riesling or how you can enjoy Riesling as an aperitif. Also, it's a great food wine. It's lovely and crisp, and that seam of acidity really helps it carry through. Now, this is made for us by Weingut Wess, and they are based in the Kremstal region of Austria. So on the map that you are seeing now, up in the top part of the map that's kind of yellowy coloured, that is where Kremstal is, and it's more situated around the town of Krems. Weingut Wess used to be known as Weingut Rainer Wess, and it was Rainer who founded the winery in 2003. He decided to, after studying enology and studying at different vineyards, decided to buy some of his own vines. And in 2003 planted and got those underway and really focused on Riesling and Grüne Veltliner as the grape varieties that he wanted to have and to show the Austrian terroir at its best. Now it is his daughter Christina and her husband David who are helming the winery and the vineyards. but they still carry through her father's vision of really honing in on what makes Riesling and Grüne Veltliner from the Kranstall region great, and what that terroir comes through. The fruit is sourced across Kranstall vineyards. It's carefully selected, it's blended with real consideration, and a key thing is that it is hand harvested, so they are picking the fruit at its purest, at its most healthy. And you might notice on the new label that we've got a cute little mountain goat. So that is representative of the fact that the vineyards are quite sloped. There's some higher elements that mean it's a little bit tricky for anyone other than goats and hand pickers to get up to. So it just is representative of that fact that it is it's a wine that takes care and consideration onto it. Hopefully it's one that you enjoy. I know I do, and I think it's a really great start for a tasting. So if you are thinking, oh, what can I have as a non-sparkling aperitif, or what can I have as something to match all manner of foods? Really great with schnitzel. We go with those what grows together, goes together elements. You can't really do much wrong with a Riesling. It's quite a sort of a common phrase or parlance within the wine trade that Riesling is really like a king of grapes, and it really comes through with this one. So I hope you're as pleased as I am that this is what we started with. Now, while I just get rid of this, and hopefully you are pouring your next wine as well, we will be moving on to the Society's French Chardonnay. Now, you may be familiar with another Vin de France Chardonnay that we've had recently, which was the stopgap that we had last year when yields in Burgundy weren't quite as we'd hoped. This is created in a similar vein. It's multi-regional, hence it being a Vin de France, and it has grapes from the Languedoc-Roussillon, from down in the foothills of the Pyrenees, and also some grapes sourced from the Mâcon village, so they add a little bit of that white Burgundy finesse to the Chardonnay. Now, if you get a bit of a nose of this one, a bit of a swirl, you may find that if you've had this chilled, it will benefit from a little bit of a warm-up. A lot of white wines will actually benefit from having a little bit of a warming influence onto them. Sometimes we have our white wines much too cold and our red wines much too warm, but we'll come on to that when we talk about the red wines. So hopefully you're getting a lot of that lovely citrus fruit again, this time a little bit more lemon and perhaps some grapefruit rather than the lime character of the Riesling. But it also does have some lovely richness to it. It is ripe and rounded. There's that lovely melony character. Looking at maybe sort of a cantaloupe melon, less so the honeydew sweetness. But it's really quite appealing. It's something that makes you want to sort of dive in. It smells like sunshine, which with the weather we've having lately is really quite something. Now, let's have a taste. Hopefully you can taste that weight that is coming from Chardonnay being sourced from these multitude of regions. We talk about Chardonnay as a grape variety as one that can do so well in so many different ways. You look at it in Chablis, for example, and it makes really lovely, precise, austere white Burgundies. And you look at how well it can do in the USA and in Australia, for example, where it can take on really lovely richness, it can have oak on it. So it can handle a lot of things. It's not a precious grape variety. It likes to do as it does, and it's handled very well. In terms of the blend of wines, or the blend of grapes from regions, let's go back to that, because we've talked about the three regions it is mainly sourced from. So we have from the Languedoc and Roussillon, so that is your southern French grape sourcing. This is what gives the body and the weight. So there's lovely long sunshine hours. It still has acidity, but the fruit is riper. If you think about the fruit styles that you're tasting in a wine, and you're thinking, oh, it's got lovely green fruits, you think about where those green fruits might typically be grown. So somewhere that it's got a cooler climate. So your gooseberries and your green apples do very well in this country, and they do very well in the northern parts of Europe. When you're thinking of riper fruits, richer fruits, so those lovely fleshy stone fruits, peaches, apricots, they'll do better the more southerly they are grown. So as you go through your ripeness of fruit, you can start to think about the climatic influences of the regions that they are from. So then we have the grapes sourced from around the foothills of the Pyrenees. Now you've got that lovely influence of the mountain ranges. They're offering a lovely cooling influence. They're offering a lot of protection, so that these grapes, these Chardonnay grapes, are holding on to their acidity really well. And they've got more of those bright apple and pear flavours. And it adds that grip and tension to the wine. In terms of the grapes that are sourced from the Mâcon, now those are where the finesse and the slight elegance and the length come from. And you round that all together into this lovely Vin de France. It's something that's really quite a crowd pleaser for Chardonnay fans, or even for people that think, I don't like a Chardonnay, those ABC people that we are familiar with in our wine drinking friends. They might not like a Chardonnay from Australia or the US, or there are some great examples because they're very familiar with having oaked styles. They might actually prefer this. And I think if you gave them this in a glass, without telling them it was a Chardonnay, they might find that they were a little bit more inclined to enjoy it than they thought they would be. So we've just mentioned oak. This is an unoaked example. It doesn't have those spicy, vanilla-y, toasty flavours coming through. And actually it allows those pristine fruit flavours and the freshness and the primary characteristics to really shine in this Chardonnay. If you do still have some of the Riesling, and perhaps you have enough glasses to have them side by side, you will be able to see, hopefully as well, that this one is slightly darker in colour. It has a little bit more of a yellow tone to it in comparison to the Riesling, which is that little bit clearer by comparison. Now, as well as this wine having its grapes sourced from a multitude of areas, in terms of its production, it is made for us by Le Vin Anjou, who are a négociant. You may be familiar with the name Le Vin Anjou because they are responsible for the Society's Beaujolais. They are responsible for a lot of our Beaujolais offering, and particularly in the Beaujolais region, it is really quite common for a négociant to be used. It really helps to offer us the ability to really pick and choose where we want to have our fruit sourced from, who we want to work with in terms of the blending of the wines. So we really can tailor it to what we expect. And with this being a society-owned label, we make sure that our own label are representative of the style, but also our buyers do have some semblance of know-how in terms of what our membership will enjoy. So our own label wines are tailored in some way to your palates. It's not going to be to everyone's taste because obviously wine is so subjective, but it is enough that we have an idea of what our membership like, and we can make sure that this is a really great example of that style of wine from that grape variety in that region. So Le Vin Anjou are the producers of this wine. As I said, they've been very much in the making of our Beaujolais, also our own white Burgundy, which is managed by them. And they, as well as being based in the Beaujolais area, they've got an office down in the Languedoc-Roussillon as well. So they are in absolute locality to where the majority of these grapes are sourced from for this blend. If you are familiar with the Society's White Burgundy and you're thinking, oh, how does this compare? As it is the same grape variety, you will maybe find that the Society's White Burgundy has a little bit more complexity to it, a little bit more length and depth to it in the glass, but it does have those consistent characteristics of a Chardonnay. I hope you enjoy it. I'll let you finish what's in your glass and then we'll move on to wine number 3, which is our third white wine of this tasting. So while you're preparing your glasses, I will move on and pour my own. This is also a wine that is under one of our own label ranges. Wine at number 3 is our bin series wine. It's number 13. It's the Pedro Jimenez Seco. It's Montia from Moril, 2023 vintage. Now the Seco is the very important thing. 2021 vintage. Bin 13, 2021. The Seco is the very important thing. You may be familiar with Pedro Jimenez as a grape variety or a style of wine from Jerez that is, it is a grape variety that is used to make sherries, but it is also a style of sherry. It is that really lovely, thick, luscious, treacly style of sherry that is very sweet, very rich. This is not that. But you may find that you are getting notes of something that is very familiar to sherries that you've had in the past. It's a very interesting wine. It's a very exciting wine. If you give it a good swirl, really get your nose in. Now, as I said at the start, if you do have any questions, do pop them through. Now, hopefully you've got a good, strong whiff of what is in your glass. And hopefully you will see that it's got that lovely apple peel, a bit of bruised apple. There is some really sort of fresh almond, green almond, nutty notes to it. And if you are a sherry fan or you're familiar with sherry, you will get that really sort of distinct hint of a Fino or a Manzanilla sherry. This is because it has that same floor influence onto the wine. Now, Pedro Jimenez, as a grape variety, is, as you can see, quite a full, rich grape, or rich in voluptuousness, I suppose you could consider it. It's a very round grape. This means that when it's made as a very sweet variety, it really raisins down, and that those lovely musts can come through. But when it is made in a dry style, like this is, it can be quite an unassuming wine in and of itself. So when it is fermented, it's fermented as a everyday dry white wine, but it is the maturation that is very important here that really gives it its distinctive style. Now that comes, as I mentioned, from that veil of flor. Now flor is the yeast that is indigenous and it is naturally occurring. It creates this lovely thick layer across the top of the wine as it is in its maturation vessel. And it stops anything getting in, but it also stops oxygen. So this is a biological aging. It stops anything going in, and it also allows those flavours of the flor to sort of permeate into the wine. So you get that lovely yeasty, doughy quality. And when I say doughy, it's that really fresh baker's dough, baker's yeast, almost tangy. And with the apple and that nutty flavour, it really gives this really Moorish quality to it. Now, as I mentioned, this isn't from Jerez. It is actually made in Andalusia. So it doesn't have that PX sherry. Now, there's a question that's come in about why Pedro Jimenez isn't used to make a dry sherry in Jerez. And I would say that it's in some ways more so because it is just so suited to making a very sweet sherry in Jerez. You think how hot Jerez can get. It's right down in the south of Spain. Andalusia isn't. So it's more that in the tradition and the way that sherries are made in Jerez, that things like Palomino are more often used or more likely to be seen making a dry sherry. It's important to note we've been talking about sherry and bandying the word sherry around a lot. This isn't a sherry, it is an unfortified white table wine from Pedro Jimenez. Now, if you want to take a bit of a taste, we'll come on to another really interesting question shortly. Now, on the palate, hopefully you will be really having that puckering, very Granny Smith apple peel flavour. It's got a lovely salinity to it, a bit like a preserved lemon that you're getting. It also has this lovely chalky complexity, and it's a little bit just textured on your teeth, perhaps. Now, for me, this ties into the next question, which is that there's no food match listed for this one, but what would it go with? Really, with this wine, the world is your oyster. Oysters may be something that you would want to have. It adds that lovely acidity that you would maybe get from a spritz of lemon or some shallot vinegar onto an oyster. So seafood, it would really go well with. Again, great as an aperitif, but really, because it is so fresh and zesty and mouth-watering, personally, what I would love to pair this with, in a similar way to what I would pair Fino, Manzanilla, Amontillado with, is those lovely salty foods. So whether that is just a simple bowl of crisps, if you're just feeling easy on a Wednesday night or a Monday night as we are now. So crisps, salted nuts, anything that makes you want to take a swig of something that's quite thirst quenching, because although it is acidic, it does have a lovely freshness to it. Anything that is a little bit saltier from a main meal sort of type food. So things like your salt cod, whitebait, oily fish, so mackerel, trout, salmon even, anything where you can have the wine add your little spritz and your little lift. That would be a really good pair. But I also think because it has that really distinct apple character that is on the nose and it also carries through on the palate for me, I think things that are a bit more from the sort of pork based, so whether that's belly pork that's got a lovely salty crackling, or things that are kind of like bacon lardons and things, that would be a really, really nice pairing for me, I think. If you have any great pairings, I would say do pop it down on the reviews on the website. You can share it with other members as to what you found worked well with this. It's really fresh and it's very interesting, and it's something that I think as a wine, talking of new additions, is one that a lot more members will hopefully become open to and aware of. You look at the way that sherry as a fortified wine is really gaining traction again as something that's not just for Christmas, it's not just in a little schooner. This, as an unfortified sherry grape, or grape that is used predominantly in sherry, I think this could really be something that is really coming through and that we're seeing a lot of wine drinkers appreciate more and are more invested in. I think it's just so complex and interesting. And that lovely texture as well comes from the fact that it is matured in tinajas, which are concrete amphora. So there is a level of inertness to this vessel as a maturation vessel, similar to the inert character that you get from stainless steel. And you're not letting in any of that oxygen, so you're protecting your floor, you're not getting any oxidative characters into your wine, but it does have a slight influence on the texture. Whether that's something that is just mental, where you think, oh, it's had a lovely clayey, concretey feel to it, and I can feel that, similar to if you have a canned wine and you think it tastes a little metallic, which it doesn't. It can have that influence, but also the soils from where these grapes are grown. So down in Andalusia, you also have very chalky soils, similar to Jerez. So you have some Albaritza, which is the really like white chalky soils. This is really great because it means that there is a porosity to the soil, which means that it doesn't hold too much water when it's not needed. But if it is very needed on a very dry, hot season, it does have it. But the drainage is great because it means that there is some poor yields. And poor yields mean that the vines concentrate their efforts into the fruit. If anyone is a keen gardener, you'll know that actually you don't necessarily want a really leafy plant. You want the blooms, or you want the fruit from whatever plant you're growing. And putting your vines under a little bit of stress, making them work for their nutrients, really helps with that. It means that the efforts aren't in lovely leafy canopies, they're into the fruit itself. This is produced for us by Bodegas Alvear, and they are a prestigious and internationally renowned bodega in Andalusia. And the star of their production is Pedro Jimenez. They do make it as a sherry as well as the still wine, unfortified wine, as they have done here. But yeah, it's really something, isn't it? I hope you're enjoying it. Or if you're perhaps still a little on the fence, I hope you're thinking, oh, I might revisit this with some food. Now, there's a question of whether the food recommendations will be added to the website. That is something that I will pass on, and we can hopefully get those added on there for you. But I think, as I mentioned, if you perhaps have tried the wine, leave a review. Leave what you think is a really great pairing, because as fun as wine is to have on your own, it is really great to be able to have it together and share your knowledge and to share what you like about the wine. It is subjective, but that subjectivity only goes so far. And actually, it's really helpful to know what other people think work, and you can tailor your palates to each other. So I will get that passed on to our website team, but do let us know as well. So that's all of our white wines for this evening. Before we move on to the red wines, I will just let you rinse out your glass if you need to. Take a moment to have a sip of water. If you'd like to just cleanse your palate in readiness. We've got some very interesting and exciting red wines as we go. Well, I've said that a lot this evening. I think all the wines are exciting and interesting. And it's just testament or representative of what our buyers have been able to do now that they're out again, visiting our producers, visiting our growers, and being able to bring back their finds and add them to the list and have some really great new bottles available for you. So the next wine we'll be going on to is a Gamay. So this is the Val de Loire Gamay. It's La Muse. It's from Hotu Boulanger, and it is the 2022 vintage. Here we go. So another great label. She is La Muse. And this is from Loire. Now, Gamay is a grape variety that is a thinner skinned. It's similar when categorising red grape varieties to a Pinot Noir, in that the tannins are softer, they're a little bit more gentle, it's more plush. But as a Gamay in the Loire, it is different to the Gamay that you see across Beaujolais. Now, Beaujolais is a whole other topic of conversation when you look at the different cru in Beaujolais and how Gamay is different in those very close but very distinct areas and appellations. This is from Loire. It is from Muscadet Sèvres appellation, which is a wet maritime climate. It is very near the sea when you are looking at a map of the Loire. And that maritime climate means that the drainage here for the soil is really key. Again, you've got chalky limestone and gravel. You don't want to have too much mildew coming through. And I've skipped ahead talking all about the ground and everything already before we've actually spoken about the wine. So let's take a pause. Let's have a little nose of what's in the glass. There's some really lovely plush fruits here. They are ripe, but on a sort of squishy level. When you've got some raspberries and blackberries and blueberries that have perhaps been left in a colander after picking, and they've buried down onto each other and sort of melded together. They've got that lovely fruity black, blue, red fruits. It's enticing, it's ripe, On the palate, it's really lovely and smooth. So you can feel that those tannins are gentle, they're well integrated. The thinness of the skin is key here in the Gamay grapes, similar to Pinot Noir. So that is where the, not lack of tannin, but the smoothness of those tannins and the less bulky characteristics are coming through. There is some savoury quality to it. A little bit sort of herbal, a little bit of a spice to it, but a gentle spice. It's a little bit baking spice, not quite into our black pepper realm, but there is depth as well. And hopefully you'll see from the colour, it's not particularly white on my hand, but it is a lovely pinky, reddy blush to it. It's clear. You can see the lightness, and again, that is down to the thinness of the skin. But it really is delicious. Now, we were talking about the soils. So being chalky, limestone, lots of lovely drainage, it means that those grapes, again, are really focused on having lovely ripeness to them. There's a lot of health to them. Being that close to the sea, as well as having the slight issue of the dampness, you also do have the mitigating factors that you'll get sea breezes coming in, and along the Loire, you've got those breezes that help get rid of any mildew or stop it taking hold. So you really have these grapes at their optimum health, which is very important for where this wine is from. So Huteau Bollinger is now run by Catherine Huteau Bollinger, and they have 45 hectares in total. 12 hectares are over for their red varieties, of which Gamay is a key one. They also do Merlot and Cabernet Franc. And one of the key things in the way that they operate is that they vinify without sulphur, so they don't have the use of sulphur, which can sort of mitigate diseases in a more, let's not say invasive, but in a more focused way. So without the sulphur means that they really benefit from those sea breezes that mean that they aren't having diseases take hold. They use indigenous yeasts. Whether you can taste that coming through, I don't know. I don't know that I can. I've not done enough tasting of comparative grapes or comparative wines made from different yeast strains. But it is something that they focus on and that they feel is in partnership with their advocacy for biodiversity and sustainable agriculture. They have a very interesting way of fighting parasites, which is by releasing sort of pheromones and having some sexual confusion for the parasites within their vineyards, which is something that is becoming more and more apparent with the rise of biodiversity and biodynamic principles in winemaking. And it is something that really does influence the pest control in a vineyard. It's something that they're very focused on, and actually it plays hand in hand nicely with what our sustainable aims are. We want to be working with producers that have these similar attitudes to growing their grapes and treating their vines in that way, whether that is biodynamic, whether they want to have a biodynamic accreditation, or whether it's just a principle that they will follow as a standard. In a very simplified way of describing biodynamic winemaking, it really is going back to the ground and making sure that your bedrock, your foundations of where your vines come from is at the best it can be. There is a whole lot more to it, and I would have a look on our website because we do have some great pieces about biodynamic winemaking and producers that are doing it really well and taking a real interest and control of it. But it really starts from the ground up, which sounds like quite a simple way of making wines, and something that perhaps should be done so much more than we are seeing, because let's not forget that winemaking is agriculture. It's great agriculture because it gets a really lovely product at the end, but it is something that we're seeing a hell of a lot more of. in terms of food matches for this one, if you're interested, things like chicken, lighter poultry dishes, lighter pork dishes actually, would go really nicely because you don't have that astringency of the tannin. It doesn't have that really drying quality which can put things off. If you're looking for a red wine with fish, if you are, I was going to say daring, but actually it's not that daring a concept to have a red wine with fish nowadays. But this would be a really nice one. So it would go with things like salmon or trout. And the key thing is to make sure that what you're serving with your dish as accompaniments or seasoning is in a way more tailored to the grape. So you wouldn't necessarily do a Hollandaise or a Beurre Blanc. You would have perhaps more of a herb sort of crust. And those flavours would be imparted with this. It's also a really lovely pair with softer, gooier cheeses. So those really creamy cheeses that almost are quite decadent and feel a little bit like double cream. This is really beautiful because it's got those lovely, plush, ripe fruits, summer fruits even. And what goes best with a summer fruit pudding than a big dollop of cream? So if you're looking to liven up your cheese board a little bit, this is something to really consider. It's going to be quite different to the wine that we're going on to next. So that is the Exhibition Ginevra Nausa 2020. So I'll give you a moment to pour that one into your glass as well. Now this is another semblance of one of our own label grape wines, and it is now under the Exhibition label. So one of the main things before we get too much into the wine is to talk about the difference between the Society's label, so Society own, and the Exhibition wines. The Exhibition wines are to sort of be considered as a notch up to what the Society's own label are. They're a little bit more focused on specifics, so a little bit more refined into a specific region or a specific style of wine or a specific grape variety. And that's what we are seeing with this one, which is the Exhibition Ginevra from Nausa. It's 2020. Now it's still quite a pale wine. If you do have something white or your hand, you can do a little bit of a glance through, but you'll hopefully see that in comparison to the Gamay that we've just looked at, the red tones in this glass are much more on that true red style. You're almost verging a little bit towards not orangey, but a deeper, rustier red, a brick red, in comparison to the Gamay, which had a little bit more of that sort of magenta hue, that bluey tone to it. Now, this really jumps out of the glass at you. It's really, really ripe and pronounced and distinctive. Hopefully you're getting a lot of lovely black cherry, red currants. All of your lovely red fruits are coming through. And that's the red berry fruits, not particularly your red apple or things that are on the crunchier side. These are your tart red fruits, so cranberries, red currant, a little bit of pomegranate in there as well. And there is some real depth and complexity to this as well. There's some spice there, there's a bit of licorice, there's also a bit of a balsamic note, but it's really appealing. Even smelling it is making my mouth water. Now, if you've just taken a sip, same as me, hopefully, you'll be finding that the acidity it's pronounced, it's moreish, it makes your mouth water. And actually have a little sip and swallow that one if you've not been swallowing as we go. And you'll really feel that lovely smoothness of the alcohol. It's very well integrated. This is 12%, so it's not a high alcohol wine as red wines go, but it's very smooth and it carries the spice through and it carries flavour through. That's a key thing about alcohol as well, is it really carries flavour well if it is handled well and well integrated into a wine. And those lovely red fruits are coming through as well. The lovely tartness, that acidity, that balsamic character. This makes it a really lovely wine for pairing with high acid foods. If you think of Greek cuisine, you can think of lovely Greek salads, lots of olives, lots of red onions, lots of tomatoes. They can be very tricky contenders to be pairing a wine with. But this does it really, really well. It's quite a favourite for the tastings team to use a Gin Mavro when we are pairing with a tomato-based dish for our lunches and dinners. And that's not our own lunches and dinners, although we do, but our lunches and dinners for members at the Society. It's really enticing. I can't quite stop smelling it, but I'm going to pop it down for a moment and tell you a little bit more about it. So that high acidity, that real tannic structure, that level of alcohol that's not so high but enough that it's present, is really great at meaning that these wines and that the Gin Mavro is a grape variety that can sustain and develop, and it will change and evolve, and some of them can really age very well. We say that this has a drink date of up to 2026, so you've got another 3 years. But actually, it could probably do a bit more if it's handled in a nice, careful way. You want to keep it in a nice, consistent, cool temperature in the dark, let it do its thing. And maybe, if you're able, get a case, revisit it every few years and see how it's changed. It will take on more of that dried fruit. It's not losing flavour, but it will dry down and that balsamic will come through and it'll be really interesting and evolved and delicious. This comes from Apostolos Thimiopoulos, and here he is. Here is Apostolos himself. He is one of the, let's say, perhaps the godfather of Gin Mavro. He is really focused on making excellent Gin Mavro. He is now the head of operations at Thimiopoulos. He took over from his father. He studied enology in Athens and then started experimenting seriously with his family in making what was then a indigenous Northern Greek variety, Gin Mavro, something that the rest of the world really should sit up and take notice of. And we've seen over the last few years the resurgence and the let's not say craze, but the real interest in Greek wine at the Society and just within the wider wine world, in part from tourism, people going there and trying the wines in situ and wanting those back home, and also the ability of winemakers in Greece to be able to travel around other wine regions and pick up skills and share experiences with winemakers and bring those back to the wines that they are creating. So they really focused on making Gin Mavro into a lovely new modern style, which is what we have here. They also really focus on biodynamic agriculture. They don't prune, they let the vines find their own balance, which is a lot of faith to have in your fruit and in your vines. But some of these vines are around 50 years old. They're very well established. They know what they're doing, and there's an element of letting them do their thing. And then when the grapes are ready, that's when Apostolos and the team step in and create these beautiful wines. They do have a little bit of an issue with some forms of pests. In particular, wild boar are very partial to the sweet, ripe grapes, or sweet to them. So that can be a little bit of a pest that they have to manage in a humane way. And they also had a slight issue in 2012 where they had a lot of locusts that were plaguing the vineyards. And to combat that, they decided to release some guinea fowl who really enjoy locusts. So again, it's working with the environment that they're in, working with the nature to make these beautiful wines rather than working against it or combating what is naturally occurring. It's a really, really lovely wine. It's a really great example of the grape. Interestingly, Gin Mavro means sour black or black of Nausa, And I think it's interesting when you have a grape variety, the name is so distinctive and exactly what you're getting in your glass. It's a really lovely way to describe it, those lovely sour, dark cherry notes with that lovely balsamic lift coming through. Now we'll be going on to the final wine of this lineup. Now this is a recorded tasting, so if you do want to revisit it, it will be available on our website. Or if you're not watching with any of the wines at present, but you have been inspired to buy any, you can revisit this when you have them. Now the next wine number 6, is the Crimée. It's the Val de Uco from, it's Malbec from the Val de Uco, and it is the 2020 vintage. So it's an Argentinian Malbec. We've gone even darker in the hue here. Similar tone to the Zinamavro, but it is more concentrated. It's less to be able to see through. There's that opaqueness to it. Let's have a lovely nose of the glass. There's a common theme with these wines of ripeness. And again, this is a very ripe wine, but it does have a little floral lift to it. It's floral of your red flowers, your sort of red roses. You're not looking at blossom. You're looking at things that are perhaps a little bit violets, sort of perfumed flowers that you would find within perfume that aren't of your white blossom variety or your orange blossom citrusy flowers. This is a very interesting wine in terms of alcohol. This is our highest alcohol red that we have in this lineup. It's 14%. On the nose, you can't smell it, but have a sip and see how it feels when you're swallowing the wine, or feel how it is within your cheeks. Now, as you've swallowed, oh, it's caught me there. As you swallow, hopefully you will feel that warmth going down. But you will also feel, in comparison to the other two, there is a bit more of that tannic structure. I say a bit more, it's quite a bit more. It's drying on your cheeks. You can hopefully feel it a little bit fairy on your teeth. If you were drinking a few glasses of this, you may well find that you get that lovely hue of blacky red on your teeth as you're enjoying it. And it's really one that you can almost chew through a little bit, but in a really pleasant way. It makes it very Moorish. It makes it something that you are savouring rather than really swigging as a wine. It's something to consider and spend a bit of time with. This has been matured for 12 months in oak. It's had 15% new oak, so you are getting some of that lovely spicy cigar box, a little bit of licorice coming through, and it's had the rest of old oak. Now, of the oak, 80% is French and 20% is American, so you are getting that lovely mix of spicy and vanilla and a little bit of creamy. It's really captivating on the nose and on the palate. In terms of where it is from, in the Uco Valley, which is about an hour drive from Mendoza, one of the key things is that it has a really clear diurnal range. So that's the difference in the daytime temperature and the nighttime temperature. So when it comes to night, it really cools down. And that means that although the grapes have been ripening through the day in the warmth, when it gets that coolness in the evening and through the night, it retains the acidity, and it has got some lovely balance and freshness to it. It means that it's not overripe, the fruit's not jammy, and it creates this lovely, elegant Malbec. It's got some seriousness to it. Mendoza in Argentina is that sort of rugged, dry sort of terroir and climate. But the name comes from the fact that it was inhabited by the Mapuche indigenous group who were nomadic, and they would move between the different oases, which is what Quime is in the indigenous language. So this is reflective of those little pockets of lushness and pockets of water that help keep these vines at their freshness, at their ripest, and really helps add some nuance and some depth and dimension to it. The Uco Valley, although part of Mendoza in Argentina, is quite rightly considered in its own right as somewhere that's quite a serious contender of Argentinian wine. It's home to some top producers, so 55 Malbec are where this wine is from, and the winemaker is Alejandro Stojanovic, who spent time at Catena Zapata, which you may be familiar with as one of the top producers in Argentina, so really has that experience. But as well as being home to the real key producers of Argentina, there is a lot of interest from producers from other regions of the wine world, particularly producers from Bordeaux. Some of the top producers from Bordeaux are taking a keen interest because of the terroir that you're getting in this region, because of those climatic influences, that lovely diurnal range, and the soil as well is something that we're coming back to, has been a consistent theme with these wines, which is that it's free draining clay and a rock base with a stony, sandy surface. So again, you've got lovely drainage. It decreases the vigor of the vines, so less leafy, and it has a real control on the yields. So it has that real concentration of fruit and flavour and intensity and depth in the grapes. And yeah, you can really, really smell that concentration coming through. I mean, even now, giving it a little bit of time in glass, it's just developing further. It's got some lovely dark black curranty fruit coming through, a little bit more spice to it. It's really appealing. And I was just giving that a little warm because this one is slightly too cold. But as I did mention, in terms of having white wines that are slightly too cold and serving, we sometimes serve our reds slightly too warm. And you could actually, particularly in this weather and with what you may be serving with your wine, consider chilling these slightly. Particularly the Gamay and the Ginamavro would do very well with having a little bit of time either on ice if you have a little ice bucket to hand, or pop in the fridge for say 15-20 minutes before serving, and it helps just bring out the brightness. Even the Malbec, if you are having a bit of a summer bash and we're doing a bit of a barbecue, lots of grilled meats, popping this in the fridge before pairing with those would really help lift and brighten up the flavour of the grapes in this wine and really help it pair through nicely with those types of foods. I hope you've enjoyed this range of wines. We do have another question about online tastings. Now, this may be your first online tasting with us. It may be one that you've seen pop up on the calendar. We have had a little bit of a halt on online tastings just while our programme has become a little bit more underway with in-person tastings. We're balancing out our capacity as a team. But we will be having online tastings coming back, so we do hope that you will be joining us for those. We will be having more sample pack events as well. Hopefully in the next few weeks you'll see these start appearing onto the website, and we do hope you'll be able to join us for those. But really, all that is left for me to say is thank you very much for joining me for this tasting. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the wines. If you do want to drop us any other comments or questions post-tasting, please do, and we'll be able to get back to you on those. But otherwise, thank you for joining me, and have a lovely rest of your evening. Thank you.